Welcome to the Money Over 50 podcast, brought to you by Dallas Davison and Michael Hogue from Money Over 50 Financial Advisors. This information is general in nature and does not take into account your objectives, financial situation, or needs. Therefore, you should consider whether the information is appropriate for you and your personal circumstances. If you require personal advice, please contact Money Over 50 Financial Advisors. Here are your hosts, Dallas Davison and Michael Hogue.
Welcome to Money Over 50 with Alan Jones and John Laws. Dallas, I feel like we're Alan Jones and John Laws. We're 6:27 a.m. We were up at 5 a.m. this morning,
doing sound checks,
getting ready to do a morning of podcasting. So we found that what works for us is a 6:30 a.m. start on a Thursday morning for podcasting. So. I really do feel that we're running a breakfast radio show.
There's probably something liberating also about how like radio hosts get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. I think it would probably get to you if you thought about how many people actually listened to the spiel that you're just vomiting out. So something, if you get up early enough, everyone else is asleep, you can kind of feel like, we're just sitting in a room just talking to each other. No one's going to listen to this. So you can probably unleash a bit more and say what you really think. So. No, I do know what you mean. It does feel a bit like being a breakfast radio host.
So today we're here to talk about It's All One Bucket.
It's all one bucket. So this is my topic this morning. And by my topic, I actually mean this topic was, I got this topic from my almost 3-year-old son, Winston.
Yep.
So he has I think toddlers, I've read somewhere, and I don't know how true this is, I read a lot of amateur psychology type stuff and take my own interpretation of it, but it's sort of the first time in their twos is the first time that a human being understands the concept of different perspectives and ownership is one part of that. So, when you're a baby can see a thing and can't understand that someone else can't see it from a different angle. And toddler is the first time that you kind of go, that's your experience of the world is different to mine, and what you can see and what you touch and what you feel is different to how I experience the world. And then I think the continuation of that is the ownership thing. So toddlers, it's the first time they go, oh, okay, so that's mine. I get to have that thing, and that's your thing there, and I don't get to just have your thing. And especially when they go to daycare and they have that, they run up against reality where they have some other kid has a toy that they want to go and take off them, and they're exposed to this concept of ownership, and that's mine. So Winston really loves pointing at things and telling you who owns it. So he'll come out and go, that's mum's car, that's dad's car, this is my truck, this is my this, that's your thing. And so where this really started, and it's sort of, I got thinking about this as it relates to clients and their different assets, is that, as some of you may be aware, as Michael's rubbed in a couple of times, Nicola and I bought a house about 6 months ago, which was a painful day for me because I never went kicking and screaming. But we bought the house after many years of me not wanting to, and then eventually I've stumped up and paid the money and bought the house. And Winston immediately decided that it was mum's house and not my house. So I've just paid all this money. We have paid all this money, and Winston keeps telling people that's mum's house. I'm going, what about me, mate? Like I've got to pay the mortgage as well. So it got me thinking, as many things do, about this as it relates to people's retirement planning. And so the phrase "it's all one bucket" is something that you and I have used many times with clients. And what we mean there is that people tend to silo their money or treat different buckets of money differently. So they'll go, that's your, a husband and wife will go, that's your superannuation, this is my superannuation, that's your cash, this is my cash, that's your investment property, this is my car. And we sort of, and some of it is all tongue-in-cheek, and there is a fair component of that, but some of it is people sort of thinking of that in different ways. And so the phrase "it's all one bucket" is our catch-all, and it's what we keep coming back to when we go, from our point of view as the financial advisor, when we're looking at those numbers, we're looking at a spreadsheet and you're going, here are all of the assets that you have that you're going to be able to draw retirements, that you're going to be able to draw your retirement income from. From our perspective, that's all one bucket. If you're a couple and one of you's got 300,000 super and one's got 700,000, that doesn't get treated any different. It's all one big bucket with $1 million in it to us. Now, there are caveats to that, which is that there's sometimes different legislation that applies to different members of a couple of different ages, and we'll go into that in a bit more detail. But I think that's probably one of those things that maybe people that are listening to this probably, maybe they do think of it in that way. But then I think there are a lot of people that I talk to in that first meeting that go, oh, well, my wife's got this, but I've got this. And I go, I don't think you understand, mate. Like you're on this ship together. Like if she goes down, you're going down with her. It doesn't work that way where you've got yours and she's got hers. So.
And I tell you, who doesn't recognise any of that is the family law court. It doesn't matter whose name is on the asset. No, it's absolutely. They treat that as something together. So
and I tell you, who else treats it that way is Centrelink. So and that's the other one that I
do.
So those are the two things I've said before to people. Look, they're the two big ones where people go, well, that's my super and that's my wife's super, and I go, and I jokingly have told this story to my mother-in-law many times, because she always goes, well, I've got this super and Simon, my father-in-law's got this other super over here. And I go, Jane, if you ever wanted to leave him, you could take as much of that super as you wanted. That's all one big bucket. You've raised 5 kids. You've done all the stay-at-home mum thing. You would have a field day in family law court. You'd take as much of that as you wanted. So it is all one big bucket. That's all yours together. So family law is obviously, we joke about that, but most people that have been married for 30 years are probably not going to get divorced. No. So, but it's an interesting way to think of it. Is if the family law court and Centrelink thinks of your assets as a couple as one big bucket of money, that's probably a pretty good indication that that's how you should think of it. If that makes sense. There's no point you thinking of it a different way to...
I had this just the other day. So some new clients came on board, and in the process for the discussions, the male of the couple they both had term deposits as savings. He had a larger one than the lady. When we looked at the planning capabilities of what we could do, it was we could utilise the concessional carry forwards for the lady and not the man. So we actually had this scenario where we were putting some of these term deposit monies into superannuation to take advantage of the concessional contribution carry forward or catch up, if you might like to think of it that way. We actually had to get more into the ladies' superannuation fund. And it was this big deliberation around. She was like, I don't know. And I couldn't understand what was happening. And it was because it was his term deposit. So he actually had to, and he actually said, oh, don't be silly. Like, I'll put it in there. And so I guess like people, it is a thing for people. And it's one of those things where it shouldn't, it shouldn't cause too much angst, because it is all one big bucket. I mean, we see the bottom line in a lot of respects is important, because we look at that.
Yeah, that's the one number we look at is, as a couple, this is where you retire.
And then the rest of it, if you're a couple, are interchangeable parts, really. And in this scenario, we were saying, okay, well, we've got this lazy money over here. It's not actually pulling its own weight. If we can get that dressed and going to work for you,
I was about to say that.
Then, but also if we can tap into the concessional contribution carry forwards, there's tax deductions that we can get and all that sort of stuff. So it's all interchangeable. It's more important that there's things there. It doesn't matter whose name they are in.
I would think of it as there's three members of the couple. There's the husband, the wife, and the ATO. So I don't care who gets the money as long as it's not the ATO.
Yeah, that's a good way to think of it. Yeah. That's a good way to think of it.
No, it is, and it's interesting you touched on a point there that, and I jokingly touch on it all the time with my parents-in-law, but what you tend to find is that, so with members of a couple where one of them has stayed home and reared the kids, and one of them has been out in the workforce, it is interesting because it to me, it's very rare that you come across the thing where the person who's got the higher super balance, or they've done the paid work and got the money, and it's basically like a husband and wife in that situation. The husband's never going, that's my money, that's yours.
No.
I think there's a psychological thing a lot of the time for women in that dynamic where they kind of, to some degree, think, oh, well, that's he went to work to get the money. And again, from a family law perspective, my wife still thinks that way now as a 38-year-old. Yeah. Like, so, which is very, very old fashioned of her. Yeah. But I say to her all the time, because she's like, no, because I'll obviously have to give her money to do things. She's only working part time. Yeah. And she's like, oh, but it's your money. Yeah. It's not my money. No, because the only reason I'm working full time and you're working part time is because you're at home with the kids. You're at home with the kids. Yeah, that's right. So, look, it's sorry for interjecting. No, but that's exactly what I was talking about. Where that I guess this is if anything the permission to take away from say is woman power, where if you're sitting here thinking, that's my husband's money and that's his super. No, it's not. It's all one big bucket, and that's how you need to think about it. So a couple of things off the back of that, I guess, that I want to touch on is that, so the analogy they used before of when I say it's all one big bucket of money is it's you're on a ship together and you're either going to get where you need to be or you're going to sink. And so I think a lot of the time say with in that situation, a woman going, that's my husband's superannuation and it's not up to me to, if he wants to do something silly with it, or if he wants to spend too much, or if he's not giving any thought to how much we need to retire, that's kind of his problem. It's not his problem. It's both of your problem. And so you do sort of need to take ownership of that and go, the super fund might be in his name, but if that's our retirement savings and that's the bulk of it, we really need to be making a decision as a family, as a team, around how do we get where we need to be. So that's, I'd say, one thing to think of off the back of this concept. Now, so that's really the main takeaway. There are a few caveats to that and things that I think are probably the exception proves the rule in some ways. So things where it isn't one big bucket of money, and this is really the point where we're talking about using different names or different entities to own those assets in. That should be a planning decision around how to best get you overall to get you into the best position overall in the future. It shouldn't be around that's your money because it was in a bank account in your name. Some of the things that you can take advantage of is your taxable income is treated individually. So if you've got a couple and one of them is earning $150,000 a year in paid income and one's earning $20,000 a year, if you have to own assets, if you can't own those assets inside superannuation for whatever reason, it makes sense to own those assets in the name of the lower earning member of the spouse. Yeah, absolutely. Spouse, so that their taxable income they pay less tax on that effectively. Yep. So taxable income is one. Centrelink is another one. Where I said before, Centrelink assesses all these assets as one big bucket. What I mean by that is that if you're a member of a couple, your income and your assets that are in your own names are all assessed in the same way. It's your household income and assets. The caveat to that is that if you're a member of, and we've talked about this before on a podcast, if you're a member of a couple and one of you is actually underage pension age and one is over, there's a strategy where you can actually push some money into a superannuation fund in the younger spouse's name, and it's not assessed as an asset for Centrelink purposes. Yeah, so just to be clear on that, Dallas, so the let's call it legally hiding money. So and it's perfectly legal. So if you're a member of a couple, one's age pension age, which is 67. I mean, there's a shade out where some people qualify for younger than that, but 67. Yeah. One person, the other member of the spouse is 60. Let's say. There's a 7-year window there where you can effectively any superannuation assets in the 60-year-old's name are not seen as an asset in the eyes of Centrelink. So I literally had a client with this 2 weeks ago. So the case study here of they've got $1 million in assets, which would be outside the range of the Centrelink assets test if that was all in that. So the husband's slightly older. If it was all in his superannuation fund or his pension account or even just in his name, they would be outside that. What we've actually been able to do is between this financial year and in July of next year, what we can actually do is take $440,000, push that into the wife's superannuation fund. She's actually got a couple $100,000 in there already. So the split at the moment is $800,000 for the husband, $200,000 for the wife. We're now going to swap that around effectively and get it so that the husband's only got $400,000 worth of assets. So they'll go from pretty much not being able to get any Centrelink to being able to get full age pension.
Age pension for half the member of a couple. The couple's rate, but only one of them qualifies. So it's half the.
So it's about $17,000.
About $17,000 a year. So it's not an insignificant amount of money.
No, that's right. And it's just a bit of a paperwork shuffle. There's obviously it's all general advice because there's trade-offs to make there in terms of earnings tax because we can't get that money into a pension account for her. It's sustained superannuation, but it was an interesting example of exactly that thing of it is one big bucket of money, and we think of it as you've got $1 million that we want to make sure we don't run out over the next 30 years. But one of the strategies to make sure we don't run out of that big bucket is to actually split that in a different way and get you some access to some Centrelink. So that's another caveat to that is it's not so much a caveat, it's just it is all one big bucket, but here are the different ways that you should actually think about how that bucket is broken down. Estate planning is another one. It actually does matter, even though it's one big bucket, it does matter how those assets are held when it comes to one or both of you passing away and how that gets treated on those assets going to you, going to the surviving spouse or going to your kids. So we've done many podcasts about different treatments of that inheritance tax, but that's another consideration. And the last one, which I think is probably more useful or practical on a day-to-day basis for people, is budgeting. So the takeaway from this, so there's a lot of people that we know that have, what's the old saying about there's a famous quote about every happy family is the same, every unhappy family is unhappy in their own way or something like that. Every single couple that I've ever seen has a slightly different way that they handle their money together between them. And normally if they've been married for 30 years, it's through trial and error of a few different arguments about how money gets treated and who gets to make what decisions and who's in control and who, when do we have to both discuss this and when can we make decisions. So what we're not saying here is that there's probably been a lot of discussion and communication and negotiation in some stages about how do you as a couple decide what happens with your money and how does that practically get treated and flow through and do you each have some money of your own that you spend or do you just have one big joint bank account? So we're not here to say you should throw all that out the window because it's like there's normally 30 years of discussions that have gone into that. It's a bit like the Middle East, when someone just comes and draws a line through the middle of a tribe and goes, right, this is now a new country. So
it doesn't work.
It doesn't work. So if you have strategies that are, and again, only if these strategies are currently working. If it's not working, we might as well throw it all out and start again.
Yes.
But if you've got ways that you treat money as a couple that allows you to get where you need to be and not have to argue about money constantly, then definitely it makes sense to not treat all your money as one bucket in that way and allow you to make good decisions without arguing about it all the time. So I would say that to wrap up for me, it is all one big bucket of money. There are some considerations about how different assets are held and how money is treated within that. But that's the overarching thing for me is, like I said, you're all on one ship together. You're either going to sink or make it together. There are a lot of planning considerations need to go in, but for people, the overarching thing here is to think of it as one big bucket of money. Do you have anything to add to that?
No, Dallas.
Fantastic.
Thank you for listening to the Money Over 50 podcast with Money Over 50 financial advisors. For more information and resources, visit the Money Over 50 website, mo50.com.au. We look forward to catching up again soon.